There is something deeply wrong with the immune response your body has to bread. For 1,000 years, bread was the foundation of human health. It fed immune systems, supported gut bacteria, and kept populations resilient against disease. Medieval peasants ate bread at every meal and had immune systems robust enough to survive plagues, famines, and brutal physical labor. But today, that same word bread describes a processed product that triggers systemic inflammation, disrupts your microbiome, and weakens the very immune defenses it once strengthened. In 1250, in a village outside Florence, Italy, a family ate dense sourdough loaves made from ancient wheat varieties, stone-ground flour, and wild fermentation that took 3 days to complete. That bread contained resistant starches that fed beneficial gut bacteria. It had beta-glucans that activated immune cells. It carried billions of probiotic organisms from natural fermentation. And it provided slow-release energy that kept their immune systems functioning optimally through seasons of disease. Fast forward to today. 1 in 5 adults suffers from chronic inflammation. Autoimmune diseases affect 50 million Americans and are rising at 9% per year. Food sensitivities that didn't exist a generation ago now affect millions. And the common denominator isn't genetics or bad luck. It's sitting on your counter right now, wrapped in plastic, labeled enriched, while your immune system treats every slice as a foreign invader. So what the hell changed? The answer isn't that medieval people had stronger genetics or better immune systems. The answer is that modern bread has been engineered to trigger exactly the inflammatory response that medieval bread prevented. Fast fermentation replaced immune-supporting probiotics. Hybrid wheat replaced ancient grains that nourished gut bacteria. Chemical additives replaced simple ingredients that your immune system recognized as food. Before we go deeper, drop a comment and tell us, do you get bloated, tired, or brain-fogged after eating bread? Do you have allergies, autoimmune issues, or chronic inflammation? Let us know below, because what you're about to discover will change how you see the connection between bread and your immune system. Pick up a supermarket loaf and read the ingredients. You'll find dough conditioners, emulsifiers, preservatives, and a chemical called potassium bromate that's banned in Europe and classified as a possible carcinogen. These aren't nutrients. They're inflammatory triggers that your immune system must constantly fight. But the inflammation starts even earlier, with the wheat itself. Modern bread wheat, developed in the 1960s through aggressive hybridization, contains gluten proteins that are structurally different from medieval varieties. These proteins, particularly a fragment called alpha-gliadine, trigger the release of zonulin, a protein that opens gaps between the cells lining your intestinal wall. This is called increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. When your gut barrier becomes permeable, partially digested food particles, bacteria, and toxins leak into your bloodstream. Your immune system, detecting these foreign substances, launches an inflammatory response. Eat modern bread daily, and you're triggering this response multiple times per day, every day. Medieval bread didn't do this. The wheat was different, containing 14 to 28 chromosomes instead of modern wheat's 42. The gluten structure was simpler, easier to digest, and less likely to trigger immune reactions. More importantly, the long fermentation process broke down the problematic proteins before they ever reached your gut. Modern bread is made in under 3 hours from mixing to baking. Medieval bread took 24 to 72 hours. During that fermentation, wild bacteria and yeast produced enzymes that pre-digested the gluten, neutralized phytic acid that blocks mineral absorption, and created beneficial compounds that actually fed your immune system. Today's bread skips all of that. Commercial yeast forces a rapid rise that leaves proteins intact, starches unmodified, and anti-nutrients active. The result is a food that looks like bread but behaves in your body like an inflammatory toxin. Then there are the additives, emulsifiers like polysorbate 80 and carboxymelculose. common in commercial bread, have been shown in studies to disrupt the mucus layer protecting your gut lining. This allows bacteria to come into direct contact with intestinal cells, triggering inflammation and immune activation. Preservatives like calcium propionate, added to extend shelf life, have been linked to changes in gut bacteria composition. Your microbiome, which comprises 70% of your immune system, is being actively disrupted by the chemicals meant to keep your bread fresh for weeks. Medieval bread went stale in days because it was real food. Modern bread stays soft for weeks because it's been chemically altered to resist the natural processes of decomposition. If bacteria won't eat it, why should you? And here's what makes it worse: the milling process. Medieval flour was stone ground, keeping the bran, germ, and endosperm together. These components contained fiber that fed beneficial gut bacteria, oils with anti-inflammatory omega-3s, and minerals that supported immune function. Modern roller milling strips away the bran and germ, removing 80% of the nutrients and all of the fiber. What's left is pure starch that spikes blood sugar, feeds pathogenic bacteria, and creates an inflammatory environment in your gut. Then they enrich it with synthetic vitamins that your body barely recognizes. Your immune system evolved eating bread that supported it. Now it's fighting bread that attacks it. And the food industry calls this progress. To understand why medieval bread strengthened immunity, we have to go back to the grain fields. Medieval farmers grew what we now call landrace varieties: emmer, Einkorn, spelt, hewed, and ancient forms of wheat that had evolved with human cultivation for thousands of years. These grains weren't just different genetically, they were grown differently. Crop rotation with legumes fixed nitrogen in the soil naturally. Animal manure provided organic fertilizer rich in minerals. No pesticides, no herbicides, no glyphosate disrupting the microbiome of the soil or the plants. The result was grain with higher mineral content, especially selenium, zinc, and magnesium, all critical for immune function. The wheat also harbored diverse populations of beneficial bacteria and fungi on its surface, organisms that would later contribute to fermentation. After harvest, the grain was stored whole. The bran layer protected the nutrients inside from oxidation. When it was time to make bread, only the amount needed was ground fresh. Stone mills, turned by water or wind, ground slowly and at low temperatures, preserving the delicate oils and vitamins. The flour was never white. It was whole grain containing all three parts of the wheat kernel. The bran provided fiber that fed beneficial bacteria like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, which are essential for immune regulation. The germ provided B vitamins, vitamin E, and healthy fats that reduced inflammation. Then came fermentation. Medieval bakers used sourdough starters, wild cultures of yeast and lactic acid bacteria captured from the environment and maintained for generations. These weren't pure lab-grown strains. They were complex ecosystems of dozens of species working in succession. When flour and water mixed with this starter, magic happened. The bacteria began breaking down the grain. Lactobacillus species produced lactic acid, lowering the pH and creating an environment hostile to pathogens. They also produced bacteriocins, antimicrobial peptides that kill harmful bacteria while leaving beneficial ones alone. The long fermentation, typically 12 to 24 hours at room temperature followed by a cold rise, transformed the dough. Phytic acid, which binds minerals and prevents absorption, was broken down by 90% or more. This meant the iron, zinc, and magnesium in the grain became bioavailable, supporting immune cell production and function. The bacteria also produced short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These compounds are primary fuel sources for the cells lining your colon. They reduce inflammation, strengthen the gut barrier, and regulate immune responses. A single serving of traditional sourdough provided more butyrate than most modern diets provide in a day. But perhaps most importantly, the fermentation created resistant starches and beta-glucans. These are prebiotic fibers that feed beneficial gut bacteria. Medieval bread was essentially a delivery system for immune-supporting compounds that modern bread has completely lost. Studies analyzing medieval bread recipes, recreated in laboratories, found that properly fermented sourdough increased populations of beneficial lactobacillus by 100-fold in the gut. These bacteria produce compounds that train your immune system to distinguish between harmless antigens and real threats, preventing both infections and autoimmune reactions. Medieval people didn't know the science, but they knew the results. Bread made them strong. It sustained them through disease seasons. Communities with strong bread traditions had better survival rates during plagues and epidemics. The bread wasn't just food, it was immune system medicine. Let's talk about inflammation, because this is where modern bread's assault on your immune system becomes clear. Inflammation is your body's natural defense mechanism. When you get a cut or an infection, inflammatory signals bring immune cells to the area to fight pathogens and heal tissue. This is acute inflammation, and it's healthy. Chronic inflammation is different. It's a constant, low-level immune activation that never turns off. It damages healthy tissue, exhausts immune resources, and increases risk for everything from heart disease to cancer to autoimmune disorders. And modern bread is one of the primary dietary triggers. The mechanism starts with modern wheat's gluten structure. Studies from 2013 found that modern wheat contains more immunogenic, epitopes protein fragments that trigger immune responses than ancient varieties. When you eat modern bread, your immune system detects these epitopes and responds with inflammation. But it's not just gluten. Modern wheat also contains higher levels of amylotrypsin inhibitors, ATS, proteins that evolved as the plant's natural pesticide defense. These ATs directly activate toll-like receptor for TLR4, a key component of your innate immune system. This activation triggers the release of inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha, IL-6, and IL-1 beta. Research published in 2016 showed that a T is from modern wheat triggered significantly stronger immune responses than a T is from ancient Einkorn wheat. The inflammatory response wasn't about gluten sensitivity or celiac disease. It was a direct immune activation that happened in everyone who ate it. Then there's the glycemic impact. Modern bread, made from refined flour, has a glycemic index of 70 to 75, higher than pure glucose at 100, but close enough to cause rapid blood sugar spikes. These spikes trigger insulin release, but they also activate inflammatory pathways through a process called glycation. When blood sugar is high, glucose molecules attach to proteins and fats in your bloodstream, forming advanced glycation end products, AGEs. These AGEs are recognized by your immune system as damaged molecules, triggering inflammatory responses. Eat high glycemic bread 3 times a day, and you're constantly activating this inflammatory pathway. Medieval bread, with its intact fiber and resistant starches from fermentation, had a glycemic index closer to 45 to 50. It released glucose slowly, preventing the spikes that trigger glycation and inflammation. Your immune system could focus on real threats instead of constantly responding to blood sugar chaos. The microbiome connection is even more critical. Your gut contains trillions of bacteria that regulate 70% of your immune function. These bacteria train your immune cells, produce anti-inflammatory compounds, and prevent pathogens from colonizing your intestines. Medieval bread fed these bacteria. The resistant starches and beta-glucans were prebiotic fibers that beneficial bacteria fermented into short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate, the most important SCFA, doesn't just feed colon cells. It directly regulates T regulatory cells, the immune cells that prevent autoimmune reactions and allergies. Modern bread starves these bacteria. Refined flour contains almost no fiber. The bacteria that should be producing immune-supporting butyrate are instead replaced by inflammatory species that thrive on simple sugars. Studies show that people eating high amounts of refined grains have lower bifidobacterium populations and higher levels of inflammatory markers. Then there are the chemical additives. Azodicarbonamide, ADA, used as a dough conditioner in many commercial breads, breaks down during baking into semicarbazide and ethyl carbamate. It's both classified as potential carcinogens. Your immune system must process these chemicals as toxins, creating additional inflammatory burden. Emulsifiers like datum and mono and diglycerides alter the mucus layer in your gut, allowing bacteria to penetrate closer to the intestinal wall. A 2015 study in Nature showed that these emulsifiers promoted low-grade inflammation and metabolic syndrome in mice, even at levels approved for human consumption. The cumulative effect is devastating. Modern bread triggers inflammatory responses through multiple mechanisms: immune-activating proteins, blood sugar spikes, microbiome disruption, gut barrier damage, and chemical additives. Medieval bread did the opposite. It provided immune-supporting probiotics, fed beneficial bacteria, maintained stable blood sugar, and strengthened gut integrity. Your immune system is designed to handle occasional challenges. It's not designed to fight its own food supply 3 times a day, every day, for decades. That's why autoimmune diseases, allergies, and chronic inflammation are epidemic. We're not weaker. The food changed. In 2019, researchers at the University of Hohenheim in Germany conducted a remarkable study. They took participants with self-reported gluten sensitivity and gave them 2 types of bread for 4 weeks each. One bread was made from modern wheat with rapid commercial fermentation. The other was made from ancient Einkorn wheat with traditional 24-hour sourdough fermentation. The results were striking. Participants eating modern bread showed increased markers of gut inflammation, higher zonulin levels indicating leaky gut and elevated cytokine production. Those eating traditional Einkorn sourdough showed reduced inflammation markers, improved gut barrier function, and better regulatory T-cell activity. The traditional bread literally calmed their immune systems. Another study from 2017 analyzed the microbiome changes in people switching from commercial bread to long-fermented sourdough made with heritage wheat. After just 3 weeks, participants showed a 40% increase in beneficial lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species. Their stool samples also showed significantly higher levels of butyrate production. Even more compelling, markers of systemic inflammation dropped. C-reactive protein, CRP, a key inflammatory marker, decreased by an average of 28%. Participants with autoimmune conditions reported fewer flare-ups. One woman with Hashimoto's thyroiditis said her antibody levels dropped for the first time in 5 years. Study in Italy compared populations in regions where traditional sourdough culture remained common to regions eating primarily commercial bread. The traditional sourdough regions showed 31% lower rates of inflammatory bowel disease, 24% lower rates of allergies, and significantly better immune response to vaccines in children. The researchers concluded that the loss of traditional fermentation practices may be a contributing factor to the rise in immune-mediated disorders observed in industrialized nations. Real-world testimonials support this research. Online communities of people making traditional sourdough report dramatic health improvements. A 43-year-old man with chronic sinusitis and seasonal allergies said switching to Einkorn sourdough eliminated symptoms he'd suffered with for 20 years. His doctor was skeptical until blood tests showed his Ig levels allergic antibodies had normalized. A mother whose child had multiple food allergies and eczema started making sourdough from scratch. Within 6 months, the eczema cleared completely, and food sensitivity testing showed the child could now tolerate foods that previously caused reactions. The allergist attributed it to improved gut barrier function and microbiome restoration. These aren't isolated cases. Thousands of people are rediscovering what medieval populations knew instinctively. Real bread supports immunity. Industrial bread undermines it. The shift happened in the 1960s with the industrialization of bread production. Before this, most bread was still made by local bakeries using traditional methods passed down through generations. Fermentation took time, which meant limited daily production and higher costs. Then came the Chorleywood bread process, developed in 1961 in the UK. This revolutionary technique used high-speed mixing, chemical oxidizers, and extra yeast to produce bread in 90 minutes instead of 8 to 12 hours. Bread production increased 400%, costs dropped by 40%, and the industry was transformed overnight. The problem? The process eliminated everything that made bread immune-supporting. No time for bacteria to break down anti-nutrients. No time for enzyme activity to modify proteins. No time for prebiotic compounds to form. It's rapid mixing, a quick rise, and into the oven. The industry marketed it as progress. Fresh bread, faster. Consumers, sold on convenience and low prices, embraced it. Traditional bakeries couldn't compete and shut down. Within 20 years, 90% of bread in industrialized nations was made using rapid industrial processes. Meanwhile, wheat breeding accelerated. The goal was yield, not nutrition. Norman Borlaug's miracle wheat fed millions but created grain with altered protein structures that the human immune system had unevolved to handle. By 1980, ancient wheat varieties had virtually disappeared from commercial production. The health consequences appeared within a generation. Celiac disease, once affecting 1 in 5,000 people, now affects 1 in 100. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which didn't exist as a diagnosis before 1980, now affects an estimated 6 to 13% of the population. Autoimmune diseases have increased 300% since 1960. The bread industry will tell you these are better diagnostic tools, increased awareness, genetic changes. But the timeline is undeniable. These conditions began rising exponentially precisely when industrial bread replaced traditional bread. The causation isn't just correlation. Traditional bakers who maintained old methods watched in horror as their customers got sicker eating industrial bread, but assumed they were gluten intolerant rather than industrial process intolerant. Small artisan bakeries started reviving sourdough in the 1980s and 90s, and their customers, people who thought they could never eat bread, again discovered they could tolerate real bread without problems. But these bakeries remained niche, expensive, labeled as artisan or gourmet. Mainstream bread remained industrial. The food industry had no incentive to change. Rapid production was profitable. Traditional fermentation required skill, time, and couldn't scale to mass production. Consumer expectations had changed too. People wanted soft, white, uniform bread that stayed fresh for weeks. They wanted cheap convenience, not nutritional value. The industry gave them what they wanted, and the immune systems of entire populations paid the price. By 2020, chronic inflammation was being called the silent killer, linked to 7 of the top 10 causes of death. Autoimmune diseases were epidemic. Allergies in children had tripled. And sitting at the center of this health crisis was the food that once built civilizations: bread, transformed from immune support into immune attack. If you want bread that supports your immune system instead of attacking it, you have 4 options. First, find bakeries using heritage wheat and traditional fermentation. Look for these indicators: made with Einkorn, Emmer, spelt, or other ancient wheat varieties, long fermentation, 12+ hours. Usually sourdough stone-ground whole grain flour. Simple ingredients: flour, water, salt. Starter, no additives, short shelf life, goes stale in 2 to 3 days. These bakeries are rare, but growing. Farmers markets, specialty stores, and online sources ship fresh. Expect to pay $8 to $12 per loaf. But remember, you're getting immune-supporting nutrition, not inflammatory triggers. Second, make your own sourdough bread using heritage flour. This is the most economical option long-term. Basic method: create a starter. Mix equal parts whole grain flour, Einkorn, or spelt and water. Feed daily for 7 to 14 days until bubbly and active. Mix dough: 500 grams heritage flour, 350 grams water, 100 grams active starter, 10 grams salt. Mix and let rest 30 minutes. Stretch and fold every 30 minutes for 3 to 4 hours. This develops gluten naturally without kneading. Bulk ferment 4 to 8 hours at room temperature until doubled. Shape and cold proof. Shape into loaf, refrigerate 12 to 24 hours. This is critical for breaking down anti-nutrients. Bake 450 degrees Fahrenheit in covered Dutch oven. 30 minutes covered, 15 minutes uncovered. The long fermentation is essential. It's what transforms the grain from inflammatory to immune supporting. Third, if you must buy commercial bread, choose wisely. Look for sourdough or naturally leavened on the label. Avoid anything with more than 5 ingredients. Check for whole grain as first ingredient, not enriched flour. Refrigerated section breads are often less processed than shelf-stable sprouted grain breads have some benefits reduced anti-nutrients. Even better, buy frozen sourdough from artisan bakeries. It travels well and maintains quality. Fourth, heal your gut while transitioning. If you've been eating inflammatory bread for years, your immune system and microbiome need support. Probiotics. Eat fermented foods, daily sauerkraut. Kimchi kafor. Prebiotics. Focus on resistant starches, cooked and cooled potatoes, green bananas. Bone broth supports gut lining repair, omega-3s. Reduce systemic inflammation. Eliminate processed foods. Give your immune system a break. Many people find they need 3 to 6 months of gut healing before they can fully tolerate even traditional bread. Be patient. Your immune system has been under assault for years. Pro tips: start with 100% Einkorn, the gentlest ancient wheat. Don't skip the long, cold fermentation. This is where the magic happens. Real sourdough should be moderately sour, dense and chewy, not soft and fluffy if homemade bread goes stale. Make breadcrumbs or croutons. Stale is normal for real bread. Track your inflammation markers, energy levels. Digestive symptoms, skin health, joint pain. Within weeks of switching to traditional bread or eliminating inflammatory bread, most people notice improvements. Better digestion, more stable energy, clearer skin, fewer allergies. Your immune system is designed to thrive on real food. Give it what it needs. If you're learning something valuable here, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share this forgotten knowledge with more people dealing with chronic inflammation, autoimmune issues, and unexplained health problems that might be caused by the bread they eat every day. Traditional bread isn't complicated. It's just been buried under industrial substitutes that actively harm you. The medieval baker kneading dough for tomorrow's bread wasn't primitive. He was practicing immune-supporting technology perfected over thousands of years. Technology that fed beneficial bacteria, strengthened gut barriers, and provided compounds that trained immune systems to function optimally. We traded that technology for speed, convenience, and profit margins. We bred wheat that triggers inflammation, rushed fermentation that eliminated probiotic benefits, stripped fiber that fed beneficial bacteria, and added chemicals that damage gut integrity. Then we acted surprised when autoimmune diseases, allergies, and chronic inflammation became epidemic. The answer is simple. We stopped making real bread and started manufacturing inflammatory products that look like bread. Medieval bread wasn't a superfood because the wheat had magic properties. It was immune supporting because we left it alone. We grew it in healthy soil, ground it whole, fermented it properly, and let biology do what it had done for millennia: transform grain into medicine. That's the knowledge the food industry doesn't want you to have. Because if you understand that the problem isn't gluten, isn't wheat, but industrial processing that destroys everything beneficial and adds inflammatory triggers, you stop buying their products. You start demanding real bread. You take control of your immune health with technology older than written history. Medieval bread built civilizations and strengthened immunity. Your supermarket loaf triggers inflammation and weakens defenses. The choice is yours. The knowledge was never lost. It was just replaced with processes optimized for profit, not health. And every time you choose real bread over industrial imitation, you reclaim a piece of that ancient knowledge. Knowledge that kept immune systems strong when life was brutal. Knowledge that still works today. Subscribe, and let's keep digging up what they buried.